Yes, this is Robert Spencer, and Robert, this is Dr. Omendra Ratnaji.
Yeah, Dr. Omi for friends.
Yes.
Very
So,
good to meet you.
I'll just a brief uh, introduction kind of a thing that what am I doing here? Basically, I'm an ENT surgeon. I make my livelihood through surgeries. I still see my patients every day. About a decade ago, I came across a doctor from Pakistan, and because I live in a state which is on the bordering state between India and Pakistan, so this guy was telling me some really horrible stories about the Hindu subjugation and the people, and I was even surprised to know the amount of the number of Hindus that still live in Pakistan. That's close to 10 million. And so there's another 10 million Christians and Sikhs and Jains and Parsis. So we're talking about 20 million people being subjugated by the jihadi apparatus into conversions, into kidnapping, into forced marriages, into forced prostitution, into murders, and finally, even kicking them out of the country. So the demographics are such that at the time of partition in India, which was based on premised on religion, but unfortunately our leadership botched it up. There was not a total exchange of population. A lot of Muslims stayed back in India, and a lot of Hindus were trapped in Pakistan. Uh, at the time of partition, the Hindu population of Pakistan was close to 15%, which has now gone down to about 2%, which is also fudged because the entire data is all not trustworthy. Um, uh, the European Union passed a resolution in May 2019. Three Hindu, Sikh, or Christian girls, three girls per day, are kidnapped from their homes, married to people thrice or four times their ages, converted to Islam. And this is the scale of genocide happening right now as we are talking. So, my question to you, Robert, is that how long will the so-called civilized world ignore this genocide, which is not happening in the 14th century of jihad, 1400, the onslaught of jihad on and the entire civilized world. This is happening in 24/7 television era, when information is available on our thumb. Tell me, just decipher this for me. What is this blind spot?
I wish I could, but the sane answer, if there were sane societies in Europe and North America as well, would be that they will start to wake up at very least when this comes to their own shores. And yet it has, and they haven't woken up. You take, for example, most egregiously in Great Britain. In Britain, there have been tens of thousands of British girls who have been victimized and their lives destroyed by rape gangs who forced them into prostitution and worse. And they were made up primarily of Pakistani Muslim men who were
Yes.
working on the basis of the same teachings of Islam that
Yes.
make for the love jihad crisis in India, and have also accounted for this phenomenon in Germany and Sweden and elsewhere in Europe. But in Britain, worst of all, this problem was covered over for years, and when parents would go to the police, and even the victims would go to police, the police would do nothing and say, we can't do anything because of political considerations. They were afraid of being called racist. They were afraid of being Islamophobic. And consequently, they sacrificed practically a whole generation of their nation's girls, which is the nation's future, to these rape gangs. Now, when you have a nation doing something like that, and then you ask me, what is it going to take for them to wake up? Well, that should have been enough right there.
Absolutely.
And yet, you can't even say in Britain that they were Muslims working from Islamic principles. If you say that, you'll be immediately shut down. You'll be vilified and excoriated as a racist, bigot, and so on. And you can't even say that they were Pakistani, even though the overwhelming majority of them were.
Yes.
There were some converts to Islam who were involved, but here again, it was Islamic principles that was behind the whole thing. The vast majority were Pakistani immigrants. And yet, there was a member of the shadow cabinet from the Labour Party a few years back, Sarah Champion, a member of the parliament, actually said this is a Pakistani problem, a problem with Pakistani men, and she was forced to resign for saying so, even though it was obviously true what she said. And so you ask me what's it going to take for people to wake up, and I think if Britain didn't wake up already, then Britain is already in an advanced state of decay and is committing civilizational and national suicide, and I don't know if that's going to turn around. It's the same thing to a lesser degree in Germany, where anybody who has stood up and said anything about this and said anything about the crimes committed in the name of Islam and jihad by the Muslim migrants into Germany, they are called Nazis. And as a result, they're shut down. And so you have Europe being essentially suicidal. And I think there's a very strong impulse in North America, the United States and Canada, to behave in the same manner. That to resist jihad violence has been very skillfully portrayed by the international left as being something that is wrong in itself, is racist, bigoted, Islamophobic, and to be shunned by all members of polite society. And this has been very effective. So
Yes.
now people are afraid to speak up because they're afraid of being silenced on the basis of being called these names and maybe suffering professionally and personally as a result.
And what was baffling for me as an outsider to this British whole thing was the kind of a strange name that the media came up with, the grooming gangs.
Yes.
As I have a reasonable command over English, and I thought grooming was a very positive word in our world when we used to groom our children to be good citizens of the country, citizens of the world. So I was baffled that how could they come up with such a word to rape and sexual exploitation of underage girls.
Doctor, everything in the British media and everything in the Western media in general is directed toward making sure that nobody thinks ill of Islam. Everything that they report has to be pushed through that standard, so that whenever there is a crime that has to do with Muslims and Islam, the ideological wellsprings of it are obscured, and even the nature of the crime is glossed over, so that the majority of the population doesn't start to think there's something about Islam here that we have to deal with.
Okay, so my next question to this, that if this be the case, then what is, the cause and effect phenomenon is something very fundamental to human nature. So if this is the effect, what is the cause? Is it the zakat money alone? Or is it the doctrination? Is it the left alliance? Is it something else? Is it the desire to look good to the world?
It's all of those things.
It's all mixed.
The Islamic groups in the West, and I know that this happens in India as well, they very skillfully have portrayed themselves as the victims. And so they claim, usually on the basis of false pretenses, that they are subjected to society-wide discrimination and harassment and even violence. And thus the left, which is supposed to be, or proclaims itself to be, in favor of the downtrodden, the oppressed, the marginalized, they have fallen for this completely. And they have allowed themselves to be manipulated on this basis. The idea is that the Muslims are oppressed. They are victims of racism, even though Islam is not a race, and they're Muslims of all races and Islamic jihadis of all races. They're victims of racism, and thus the champions of opposition to racism, which is how the left presents itself and thinks of itself, they have to be in their favor. And so any opposition to jihad violence suddenly becomes racist. And it's been very effective.
Yes. How important, how weighty is the money involvement here?
Well, there's probably a great deal behind it. A great deal to do with that. I don't think we even know the extent of it, but it's extraordinary. For example, the colleges and universities in the United States. I hope the situation isn't as bad in India, I don't know. But the colleges and universities in the United States are absolutely, completely sold out, completely compromised to the global jihad. And I have spoken at colleges and universities all around the United States, and I can tell you that virtually without exception, I have been received as if I were a criminal, as if I
Yes,
were
yes.
I were
I've
the
been following
problem.
you. I'm quite
That
aware of what you
opposition
have
to jihad,
endured.
and it's not just me, of course, anyone who speaks in opposition to jihad violence and Sharia oppression of women and other groups is considered to be a villain on American college campuses. And I have been there, I have stood in front of audiences, and they've all gotten up and walked out, or they have gotten up and started to yell and chant and scream so that I couldn't say a word. And they think they're being righteous, and yet they are involved with groups such as the Muslim Students Association, Students for Justice in Palestine, that are connected to jihad groups, and which numerous jihadis have been involved in on college campuses in the United States. And yet that's all right, because the jihad is part of the oppressed people, the oppressed brown people fighting against the evil white people. And so it's okay. And so this all comes down to the money. If you look, it's just coming out now from Qatar, which is the Muslim Brotherhood, from Saudi Arabia, which is the Wahhabis, and on and on and on, from Islamic country after Islamic country. That money doesn't come with no strings. That money comes with conditions. And the
Absolutely.
conditions may never be written down, may never be publicly acknowledged, but it's very clear. They get the money and suddenly they become completely in the tank, completely sold out to the jihad. It's not a coincidence.
Yeah, but this is some solace to you, in India we don't have that bad a situation, because we have a huge rural mass, and a huge mass of Hindus who have escaped the English education, and they have their robust common sense and their gut instinct to survive. So they're not going to negotiate their daughter's honor, and they're not going to negotiate their own neck to some flimsy, some philosophy which left comes and peddles to them. They get thoroughly beaten up. That's the good news. But we are looking at a global picture here and whatever is happening in Pakistan. So bringing you back to Pakistan, are you aware of the Citizenship Amendment Act, which was passed about a couple of years ago? Because we as activists, we gave our atma, which is the word is soul in English, to this fight, and CAA was a consequence of our incessant pleas with the Indian government. And if I can give you a perspective, I don't know how much you know about this law, just half a minute comparison. It's like Canada drawing up in its legislature a law that we are going to grant citizenship to say some XYZ Indians in America who have been persecuted, who are being persecuted. Imagine the hue and cry it would raise in the US, that how on earth can Canada pass a law about granting citizenship to its citizens in America? The CAA was effectively the same thing when the Indian government took the courageous step, because in one stroke, we exposed the jihad happening in Pakistan.
Yes.
Because when an Indian state passes this law in the legislature, then what are we saying? We are saying we take cognizance of the persecution of Christians, of Sardars, of Hindus, Jains, Parsis, Jews, whatever the religious minority be in Pakistan. That was enough to shake the global conscience, if there is something like that. But we did take the step. So there is some hope here that the Indian state took a stand. Now, are you aware of what happened to CAA in the America?
Yes.
Eight city councils passed resolution against CAA. It's mind-boggling.
Yes.
When they don't even understand the law. So what is your take on the CAA and the whole hullabaloo around it?
Well, as far as I understand it, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I understood the law to be exactly as you said, that it was offering solace, offering refuge to non-Muslims who were persecuted in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and that they would be able to find refuge in India. Now, I have a news website that I've run for 18 years now, and every day I see news of Hindus or Christians, occasionally Jews. There are very few Jews left, but the last Jews actually are now leaving Afghanistan, and they are facing persecution on a more or less regular basis. Hindus and Christians in Pakistan in particular are subjected to persecution on the basis of that country's blasphemy laws practically every day. There was just a case recently that I'm sure you're familiar with of a hospital chapel, and the
I sent the
Muslim
video
nurses
to Kali Dasi. If she can play it.
Yeah, that's good. The Muslim nurses took over the chapel and demanded that it be closed down and that the Christian nurses convert to Islam. This kind of thing, or they would be charged with blasphemy, which will ruin their lives and make them subject to prison or mob violence, lynching. And so this is a routine kind of incident. So India offers them citizenship. That should have been something that was applauded by the entire world as being a movement in favor of people who are genuinely oppressed and people who are genuinely victims of human rights violation.
Absolutely.
But the Islamic advocacy groups in the United States are allied with the left, and the left controls the establishment media. And so it was portrayed in the United States as if it was some kind of terrible oppressive measure that was actually victimizing Muslims in India. Now, actually, it didn't do anything regarding Muslims in India. It didn't even discuss, excuse me, it didn't relate to their status at all. Sorry. But the reality was that the Muslims in India were not in the least affected by this. And yet,
so to take this forward, Rob, sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, not at all. It's just going back to the same thing, that the city councils voted on that basis. They weren't properly informed. They were manipulated by the Islamic advocacy groups in the United States.
Okay, so what do we do about it? We cannot keep repeating the same thing. The left is a narrative, controls the narrative. Zakat money purchases them. We got to do something about it, because I'll tell you, the end game of CAA was to actually take Pakistan to the International Court of Justice and hold them responsible for the genocide of Hindus and Christians that already they have done. You know, in 1947, they killed about 1 million Hindus and Sardars. They killed another 1 million in 1971 when Bangladesh was created. So our estimate is that close to 5 million Hindus and Sikhs have already been killed by the state of Pakistan. So that was the end game, to take the stand we had taken. The Indian government, the Indian state had taken a stand, and then we take it forward, because in the International Court of Justice, activists and NGOs do not have any locus standi. Only nation states can go there and plead. So tell me, how do I have a plan in my mind? I mean, it's a very, very basic plan, that we take a couple of Pakistani Christians, Pakistani Hindus, and Pakistani Sikhs, load them on a plane and take them to the capitals of the various countries and make the world hear the stories with their own mouth. I'm sure there'll be people who will be moved by the kind of suffering that they endure on an everyday basis. We take them to the United Nations, we take them to UNHCR, or wherever it matters. What's your take on that? Like, we cannot keep saying again and again, look, we can't keep throwing our hands in the air. We got to do something about this. So what in terms of solution is your prescription here?
I think that's a great idea. I hope you're able to do it. And we need to challenge the left every time we can, on every occasion. When they lie, when they put forward a false narrative, then we have to challenge it. And we don't have the platforms that they do, but that's one of the reasons why this show is so important, and other shows like it, that we are not going to allow them to set the narrative. And we have to not let their lies stand unanswered. And some people will see the truth, and ultimately the truth will prevail, because reality is what it is. We have the great advantage of having the truth and reality on our side, and ultimately
Absolutely.
many people will wake up just seeing the course of events, and many people already have. There's widespread skepticism and cynicism, even though it is still a dogma of American politics that Islam is a religion of peace that has nothing to do with terrorism. Many people in America don't take that seriously, people who aren't political, and who they see through the media narrative already. So if we keep pushing and we keep pressing them on their hypocrisy and their contradictions, that's all to the good. So I hope this comes to pass. If you can get a forum at the UN, at the UNHCR, everywhere you can, and challenge the New York Times and challenge the Washington Post and challenge the others to allow these people a hearing on the basis of their
Absolutely.
professed concern for human rights.
Absolutely. That I promise, Robert. I will do it as soon as this COVID thing abates. That's on the first thing on my agenda. But why I'm talking about, because I know you have a global perspective as far as jihad is concerned. I have a very Pakistan and Bangladesh centric approach. What I'm trying to convey to you is that here we have a very, very alive case of subjugation of the minorities happening right in front of us. We have even their own news channels. We have their own human rights commissions. We have their own people who are bringing out reports of what is happening. We have the European Union Parliament report. We have everything in print. We have all the data. We have all the statistics. All that we need to do is to compile it, get our act together, get people like you and Arif Ajakia, and there are people who are doing a lot of good work, put our minds together, and then go ahead in a more organized approach. I'm sure the people, the average Hindu, the average Christian is going to listen to. They cannot turn their eye to this genocide of innocent people. This story needs to be taken to the larger Western society.
Well, I couldn't agree more. Yes. And this is the great difficulty that we have, that the means of communication are primarily in the hands of people who want to cover up these facts. And so the only thing we can do is keep pushing and keep telling the truth, and hope that we can gain the attention of as many people as we can. But we have to understand that all the primary apparatuses by which this information would be communicated are set on selling the opposite agenda.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but just one last point, Kali. One last point, because
Yes.
we lose the track otherwise.
Yes.
The West is committing a kind of a stupidity of the highest order.
Yes.
That if you look at the kind of they created Taliban, right? They funded the
Yes.
creation of Taliban.
That's right.
Then they funded the war.
Yes.
Then they are funding the Pakistani army, which is so we will control the Taliban, right?
Yes.
When the genie has gone out of the bottle. See, look at the way these people, the Pakistani establishment, is first taking money for creating it, then taking money for bottling it.
Yes.
And the West and the West is like the so-called the most developed and the most evolved and the most educated people are just singing to their naughty tunes.
Oh, it's absurd.
This is absurd. Absurdity
It's
of the
beyond
highest
absurd.
degree.
It's absolutely astonishing how after 9/11, the Pakistani government convinced George W. Bush that they would fight against Al Qaeda and the Taliban, even though it was Benazir Bhutto who had helped to fund the Taliban, and of course the United States fighting against the Soviet Union. But they were going to fight the Taliban, and we need $1.3 billion is what it was to start with. Then in 2008, which is already 13 years ago, it became known widely that the Pakistani government, the ISI, had been funding Al Qaeda and the Taliban with the money they had been given to fight Al Qaeda and the Taliban. And what did the U.S. Congress do? When they found out this news, they increased the amount of money given to Pakistan. This is not a joke. This is absolutely true. And they increased the amount of money given to Pakistan because apparently they thought, well, they must not have enough if they need to do this. They don't have enough to fight Pakistan, the Al Qaeda and the Taliban. Somehow they need more. I mean, the idea is so absurd. It's hard to get one's mind around. But that's what happened when it came out. It was even reported in the New York Times, which is on the other side, that the money was going to Al Qaeda and the Taliban. They gave them more.
So my purpose of raising this here was to somehow link the Western aid to these thugs conditional to the health of the minorities of Pakistan.
That would be great. That would be a sane policy. President Trump was working toward policies of that kind. He cut off the Palestinians. He lowered aid to the Pakistanis. And there was talk about making aid contingent on the non-persecution of minorities. But then, of course, the election happened, and that was that.
Yeah, that's something we can't change. So this is it. This is the whole plan, Robert, that we take around Pakistani Hindus and Pakistani Sardars and Christians around the globe, make them tell their horrible story to the world. Maybe the world listens and responds. And then we are able to somehow connect the aid to the Pakistani establishment, conditional to the safety and the health of the Pakistani minorities. In the meantime, as an activist, as my own NGO, I am working very hard on taking every Hindu, Christian, and Sikh and every minority out of Pakistan, because that's the only way they can remain. We are talking 20 million people. This is not a small number of people we are talking about. This is something scale which the Western mind doesn't understand this, because for them this is but in India we have 1.3 billion people. So for us, 20 million people, innocent victims of jihad, they cannot be left to die like this. We will take them out. It's just a matter of time. Robert, it's been great talking to you.
And, yes, likewise. Thank you.